The final thing to talk about in this playoff was during the playoff on hole 18.
Crazy moment.
We saw Haley King attempt to call a foot fault on Missy Gannon's approach to the green. Yeah. How did you interpret this situation?
I interpreted it as frustration. I don't even she was like, I mean, even if you get the foot fault there, is it even going to matter? I don't even at
it wouldn't
have.
She was down 2.
That's what I mean. So
it would have made it where Missy had to make her putt.
Yeah,
I think
it was not a foot fault. She planted well in front of her disc, centered on her disc, and which is funny because if you look at her approach on 18 in the actual round, I think she stepped a little to the left of her disc. You could have even argued that one more. But yeah, she plants behind her disc, centered on it, and then pivots and then slightly bumps it a little bit. And
after the disc was released.
After the disc was out of her hand. And I've said this before on this, but if you are calling a foot fault when even if somebody steps on their disc and just the very edge of their toe pops on it, and you call that, I think you're being a little ridiculous. I think you're looking for scraps and worry about your own game at that point. It's one thing when somebody blatantly gives himself an advantage, and that's why you call a foot fault. But trying to call a game of inches when it's not meant to be called that way. The foot fault rule is meant to protect when you're doing a standstill lie and you're stretching, right, to be fair in that way. And it's meant to protect people taking huge advantages by being way behind their disc or way off to the left or
Good call.
Good call. Or way off to the right.
I think it did hit the mic, which might have been louder than him hitting the table.
Was.
But hey,
Good
A for
point.
effort.
I've been elevated left of the lie or right of the lie. It's not meant to nitpick. If the rule was meant to nitpick, we wouldn't even allow run-ups in the first place because you could never be that precise.
Absolutely.
So Haley, and then what got me about it was Haley taking a tone of well, duh, with Christine, who is there, being it literally went flipped up in the air. And it's I can't stand when somebody takes a well, duh tone with somebody and they're wrong. If you were staring at it.
Well, I mean, it did flip up in the air. It just was, the disc was 100 feet down the fairway.
That's what I'm saying. It flipped in the air after she pivoted. She was saying that she stepped on it and kicked it up, and that's not even close. If you're looking close enough to make a foot fault call on that, you should know what happened.
Well, here's
it's like the caddy tapped her on the shoulder.
That's
hey.
Honestly, I was about to say. I think that's what happened. Because
what in the world?
This is how I view it. First off, let me say this. I'm all for people calling rules. And I think that they should call rules, and I don't think it should be an awkward thing, right? If a blatant rule violation happened,
that's fine.
Call it. I'm not upset about her attempting to make a call. What I don't like about this one was how late it was called in this situation.
Yeah, another good point.
Because Missy's disc had landed, she had picked up her lie, she was taking off her rain jacket, walking away. That's how long she had.
Yeah.
And then the initial foot fault call was made, because you can watch this all in real time. You can also watch Haley King and her caddy are walking away after Missy's thrown and then come back to make the foot fault call.
Yeah.
If you see a foot fault, it happens before the disc is released, meaning that call should have happened while the disc is mid-flight.
Right.
It should have happened foot fault because then you can't even be accused. Yeah. If that disc is halfway through the air, you don't know what's about to happen.
Right.
This was the disc had landed, Missy Gannon had won, the tournament was over. Haley King walks up and says foot fault and then tried to argue it a little bit.
Here's my question.
Because if you're watching it, what you had said of if you're watching it close enough to see it happen, why would you wait 30 seconds to make that
Somebody
call?
told her, I think. Well, here's my other question is, and there might be a PDGA rule on this, I'm sure there is, hopefully. In the two-person playoff, there should be no calling, self-officiating.
No, I think you can call because you can self-second. So Missy Gannon could have said, I did foot fault. That would have been the second.
Oh, well, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my
secondary
life.
thing is the official.
But the official, that's what I'm saying. Official should not be seconding. You shouldn't have to get the official's attention to make a call. That's what I'm saying. If they're in my book, if there's a foot fault, the official should call it. That's the end of that.
There's not a rule
Haley
against that,
King shouldn't have to call something for an official to second it if there's an official on the card.
Shouldn't have to, but I think the official could have seconded it. But also, I think the reason is because Missy Gannon, you can second it as a player.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Because you can, and it's happened before. I'm pretty sure earlier. Don't quote me on this because there was a lot of FPO foot faults called on coverage, which was fascinating.
I love it.
But
I'm
pretty sure I'm almost positive one of them, Stacey Ronsley, called Natalie Ryan, and I'm almost positive Natalie Ryan seconded it. And said I did, and then took the stroke. And then what was interesting is 2 throws later, Natalie called Stacey, and I'm pretty sure Stacey seconded it, I did. And then you just footballed back and forth.
I'm gonna have to do something pretty egregious for me to self-second myself.
If I knew,
I'm gonna have to stomp flat
if
on
I
my
knew
disc.
I stepped on my disc and my foot slid off and someone called, I'd be like, yeah. I mean, because but if I'm rotate, you're not gonna notice if you plant and rotate and kick your disc a little bit.
I'm gonna make the rest of the card call it.
Wow. There it is, Trevor the cheater.
If I step on the disc, here's my thing about stepping on the disc. Listen, the rules are what they are. But I don't think anybody in their life has ever stepped on the disc and then thrown a better shot because of it.
I had a friend who,
give me
every
a break.
time he would throw, he would step on the face of the disc.
Now, I will
and his
say
foot would
this.
slip, and it was always so. It's like that was like his plant
I
point.
did it
Was he like pivoted on his disc?
I used to do it more. You know, it's really funny. A lot of people are getting into disc golf, and this was me too. When I first watched professional disc golf, and I grew up playing a par 3 course, so run-ups to your lie were not really a thing at all. You threw standstills. So, watching pro disc golfers run up and plant perfectly behind their lie over, I was so confused. I was like,
it's an art.
How are they doing that? That's impossible. And then you realize it's not that hard, but your margin for error is like a few inches here and there. But I will say, a quick way to not step on your disc is to mark it with a mini, because it's a lot harder to detect if somebody steps on the edge of a mini.
And like what you guys were saying before, like the purpose of the foot fault is to prevent somebody from getting an advantage because they purposefully step somewhere other than their lie. If you're in the middle of the fairway, I mean, you're not getting an advantage.
Never.
No. Well, also, there was the one back in the day where Climo kept calling Stokely on a foot fault.
Yeah.
But, in that scenario, Stokely was running up sideways and was planting, a foot or two behind his lie. Now, some of them, they weren't foot faults, and Climo just called them anyways. But, in that scenario, though, he's trying to throw a shot, a very tough, tricky shot, and is blatantly ignoring his lie.
And
that's a completely
and you said
different.
It, though, it's a petty off is what it becomes.
Yes, because then at that point, once it was how am I doing? The next thing you know, it's well, you better be within an inch of your lie, or I'm calling a foot fault.
Yeah.
And that's just where I don't like when it gets to that. I'm all good with the first call of if my disc is here and I plant 2 feet behind it, and because that could open up a different angle.
Especially when you're going over something.
Yeah, I'm all for that.
There's
that's
context,
a foot fault. 100%, that's a foot fault. But if it's just I'm watching it just to try to call you, just to get a stroke.
Yeah, you can do that all day long.
Well, because if you are actually taking into account where your foot is planting, it makes the game harder.
Yeah,
it makes the shot more difficult if you have to be sure where you're stepping. So if you're showing no regard for the lie at all, then you technically have an advantage because you don't have the nervousness of having to figure out where your foot's going to go. Yeah. So there is a fine line.
I'll say, regardless of how it was brought up to her, because there's a good chance that her caddy told her, and then she just got caught in the moment. But it wasn't a good look. It looked pretty bad on coverage.
It looked like a very desperate.
Yeah.
I'm trying my last ditch ever to win
when you're losing and it's basically over and you're playing that, that's
just take it.
Yeah, it's over.
It was tough.